Tonight, disaster warnings for tens of thousands of properties and 2 states on edge as tropical cyclone Alfred heads towards the coast. Good evening and welcome to ABC News Victoria. I'm Tamara, Oudyn. Also tonight, the Premier's admission the state's bail laws aren't working. The hospital workers protesting against a hospital redevelopment. And cheers and jeers as US President Donald Trump addresses Congress. It's the biggest threat to southeast Queensland in 50 years. 4 million people are in the firing line of Cyclone Alfred as it barrels towards Brisbane. The system is currently 325 kilometres east of the city and is set to make landfall early Friday morning, bringing with it destructive winds and life-threatening flooding. Tens of thousands of homes are at risk.
As Cyclone Alfred inches closer, his force is becoming more ferocious.
Oh my God.
But it's what comes after the initial impact that's leaving businesses in low-lying areas feeling uneasy.
Today it's really about preparation. We don't necessarily want to see a repeat of what happened in 2022. It went under, water did flow through the cafe.
Residents in flood-prone suburbs also doing what they can while they still can.
The last flood was about 1.3 metres, but we're hoping that the flood levels don't reach what it did in 2022.
The Category 2 system is set to make landfall early Friday morning, bringing with it destructive winds. A real worry, especially for properties on the Gold Coast, which were destroyed by a rare tornado in 2023.
I don't think there was a house in this street that wasn't damaged by that. The roof got taken off this. This has all been repaired.
The bigger risk, torrential rain that is set to linger for days.
This sort of rainfall is expected to produce life-threatening flash and riverine flooding.
Authorities are extremely concerned that flooding could be exacerbated by storm surges, where water is pushed inland by abnormally high tides. Alfred could bring a high tide more than a metre above its usual level, which could be disastrous for many in low-lying areas. Many island residents off Moreton Bay have heeded warnings to consider evacuating.
The fact that no one can get over to the island once the cyclone hits, so you're there by yourself. It's a scary time.
The most important is human life, and that's what I chose this morning.
But some have chosen to stay.
We were a bit anxious. This will be the first time I've been through a cyclone in my lifetime, and I'm 53 years old. So the unknown's there, of course, but been through floods and things before.
For those in Brisbane with nowhere safe to shelter,
we are initiating a cyclone refuge centre at the RNA showgrounds.
The governments across the board are taking this seriously, and Queenslanders, as well as those on the north coast of New South Wales, need to do so as well.
Public transport in the city will cease tonight and will be shut down till at least Friday. Schools will also close from tomorrow.
I'm pretty happy not to be coming out in this weather to be doing school pick-up or drop-off.
Keeping safe and staying dry, the main priority. Will Murray, ABC News, Brisbane.
We have reporters in both states tonight. Laura Lavelle is in Brisbane, while Sean Turrett-Goodwin is in Yamba in northern New South Wales. First to you, Laura, what's it like there at the moment?
Well, Tamara, tropical cyclone Alfred is definitely starting to make its presence known here in Brisbane. A few big clouds behind me, but nothing too bad at the moment. And over the past few hours, wind speeds have definitely picked up too, but nothing compared with what we know is waiting just over the horizon. The Bureau of Meteorology has released its latest track map. It shows the system is currently about 320 kilometres east off the coast of Brisbane and tracking slowly but surely towards us here. At the moment, it's a Category 2 system and expected to remain that way until it makes landfall. The Bureau says they'll likely be sometime early Friday morning. Now, from this evening, we could see gale force winds from tomorrow, destructive wind gusts up to 155 kilometres an hour, especially for those island communities off the coast, but also areas south of the cyclone's eye. Now, those island communities are really the focus focus of the attention at the moment. They'll be some of the first places that will feel the impact of Tropical Cyclone Alfred. Dozens of vulnerable residents have already been evacuated from those areas. Now, from tomorrow and Friday, schools will be closed. Public transport will cease for those days as well. And we're told that evacuation and refuge centres have been set up for those who have nowhere else to go. But the message from authorities, if you are in the disaster area from the Sunshine Coast to the border and beyond, and you are in a storm surge zone or an area that could be impacted by riverine flooding, consider evacuating and staying with family or friends.
And Sean, the residents where you are experienced devastating flooding just 3 years ago. How are they preparing this time around?
Well, those particularly people who live in low-lying parts of northern New South Wales are finishing off their final last-minute preparations, and we're already starting to see some intense conditions, with the Bureau of Meteorology detecting isolated gale force winds between Cape Byron and Coolangatta. There's a particular level of uncertainty here in Yamba. This community of about 6,500 people is expecting to become completely cut off. It was isolated for about 6 days during the 2022 floods, but locals say that this time round they're determined to be as prepared as possible. The SES says it'll be standing by with supplies to deliver to any communities that do become isolated if that eventuates.
Laura Lavelle in Brisbane and Sean Tarrant-Goodwin in Yamba. Thank you both so much. Category 2 Tropical Cyclone Alfred is destined to bring some of the most significant wind and rain to highly populated areas in the nation's recent history. ABC meteorologist Tom Saunders explains.
Alfred will bring a multitude of severe weather across several days. This includes storm-force winds, torrential rain and a dangerous storm surge. Alfred is currently 300 kilometres offshore and is forecast to approach the coast tomorrow before making landfall on Friday morning, somewhere between the Gold Coast and the Sunshine Coast. A Category 2 storm is defined by peak gusts from 125 to 164 kilometres per hour. At this strength, wind is destructive and will cause some damage to homes and crops while toppling trees, which can lead to power outages. Alfred's rainfall will peak from Thursday to Saturday. Heavy falls will extend well down the coast in the onshore flow to the south of the eye. However, rainfall intensity will rapidly decline to the north of the system, where the winds are blowing in a drier offshore direction. The system may generate 6-hour totals up to 250 millimetres. That's enough for life-threatening flash flooding, while 24-hour totals could reach 400 millimetres, sufficient for major river flooding. And finally, the wide field of gales is churning up huge waves. They're averaging 6 metres near the border, with maximum wave heights over 12 metres. When combined with water levels up to half a metre above the normal highest tide of the year, the powerful waves will lead to coastal inundation and significant beach erosion.
Coming up on 7:30 with Sarah Ferguson, as the storm builds, fears turn to our most vulnerable.
People need a bit of education about how it's different to a flood and how it's so much more dangerous.
If it gets too hectic, I'm not silly, I'll head to the Strathpine Community Centre.
When you have nothing and the thought of losing what little you have kicks in, I think that's why they want to stay with their belongings. Once they've lost that, they've lost everything.
To the rest of the day's news now, and Premier Jacinta Allen has conceded that Labor's changes to bail laws have failed as pressure continues to mount on her government to take swift and decisive action on law and order. Concerns about crime, particularly in Bayside and suburban seats, are beginning to take a toll on MPs who are feeling the angst from their constituents. But there's no easy fix. Here's state political reporter Richard Willingham.
A chilling vision shining a light on community fears. Machete-armed men casually breaking into a Blackrock home early on Tuesday morning. The gang stealing 2 cars as the family slept. These incidents have become all too common. The number of residential aggravated burglaries has nearly doubled since before the pandemic. It's heaping pressure on Jacinta Allen and her Labor MPs.
Do you think the government's doing enough to make people feel safe in their homes?
Just leave me alone. People should have a right to feel safe in their homes.
I think all Victorians are concerned about crime at the moment.
The current laws, the current settings are not working.
Many committing these crimes are repeat offenders. Some are on bail. The Premier today offering a rare admission. the changes made to bail laws was wrong.
There were changes that had been made that we need to address.
But the Premier won't say what or when reforms will happen.
I'm not ruling anything in or out.
Parliament is debating laws to give police more search powers for weapons. The Coalition wants machetes outlawed.
Let's make sure that those are carrying them, that there are consequences.
The regularity of home invasions have prompted private security firms to offer their services, and that has experts worried.
At best is a band-aid response, and at worst it presents a potential threat to the community because their powers are not regulated.
I personally don't support people going out and getting their own security because I think it's a huge risk to the security guards that are out there. However, I understand what they're doing at the moment.
Cost of living remains the biggest issue for voters, but to dismiss crime concerns would be naive. The government is taking on water on law and order, and it knows it needs to act. The biggest challenge with dealing with repeat youth offenders is what to do once bail is denied.
Even if we put them in remand, even if we sentence these children, it is a short-term option. They will be released, and we have to think about what are they being released to. We can't lock them up indefinitely and pretend that the problem's going to go away.
But that's little comfort for those living the nightmare. Richard Willingham, ABC News, Melbourne.
And police are tonight continuing a 12-hour operation across large swathes of Melbourne's inner east, cracking down on knife crime. Collingwood, Abbotsford and Richmond have been declared a designated area from midday to midnight, giving officers the power to stop and search anyone for illegal weapons. Police are also checking for large quantities of drugs.
Our operation is based on the intelligence we've received. It's a random operation. We're not targeting any particular individual. It's a random operation.
Hundreds of health workers and residents from the Albury-Wodonga region have rallied in Melbourne to protest against a planned hospital redevelopment on the border. The Victorian, New South Wales and federal governments have pledged more than $500 million for the works. But when plans were released last year, locals found they'd been changed and they now fear it no longer meets their needs.
Unleashing frustrations that have been years in the making.
And we are all in.
Hundreds of healthcare workers and residents from 13 councils on the border descending on Melbourne over plans to redevelop their hospital that they say falls short.
What we've been offered so far is just a pittance.
It is piecemeal, it is staged, and we are in crisis at the moment.
With hospitals on either side of the Murray, one in Victoria and one in New South Wales, Albury-Wodonga health staff are fed up with the split campuses, citing bed shortages and huge waiting lists.
It's just gambling. It's gambling with patients' lives.
The Victoria, New South Wales and federal governments committed more than $550 million to redevelop Albury's hospital, including a 7-storey clinical services building. But it's been slammed as a band-aid solution, communities pushing instead for a single-site greenfield hospital.
This brownfield plan doesn't overcome any of the significant disaster situation scenarios that we face every single day.
Locals are worried that plans released last year outline that the hospital will remain split over 2 campuses, while bed numbers still haven't been finalised and a planned helipad is missing.
The helipad is absolutely necessary for our area to be a trauma service.
State governments remain committed to the development.
Frankly, I'm not going to stand by and see delays to this project, which is what these councils are advocating for.
But locals aren't deterred.
We need to keep campaigning.
Erin Somerville, ABC News.
Firefighters are battling 2 bushfires that threatened towns southeast of Ballarat this afternoon. Residents in Scotsburn and Buninyong were told to evacuate after a fire started at Mount Buninyong just before midday. At the same time, residents at Mount Clear and Mount Helen were warned to prepare to leave due to a fire there. Crews have brought that blaze under control, but a watch and act remains in place for the Mount Buninyong fire, which is still burning out of control. Emergency services are urging people to monitor the changing conditions in the area. A relief centre has opened at the Buninyong Recreation Reserve. Donald Trump has flagged a possible return to peace talks with Ukraine, days after his relationship with President Volodymyr Zelensky dissolved during a bitter Oval Office meeting. It comes as President Trump delivered his first speech to the new Congress, declaring that his administration is just getting started.
America is back.
A confident president in full swing.
America's momentum is back. Our spirit is back. Our pride is back. Our confidence is back. Likewise,
the traditional joint address to Congress was an occasion for Donald Trump to parade his agenda and rib his opponents.
I look at the Democrats in front of me and I realize there is absolutely nothing I can say to make them happy or to make them stand or smile or applaud.
While domestic politics was the focus, he also flagged an international rapprochement.
You're in no position.
Donald Trump says Volodymyr Zelensky has written to him, saying Ukraine is ready to come back to the negotiating table.
I appreciate that he sent this letter, just got it a little while ago. Simultaneously, we've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace.
Zelensky eager to see the US restore military aid after it was unexpectedly paused by Trump.
People should not have to guess. Ukraine and America deserve a respectful dialogue and a clear stance from each other.
The deep polarisation and anger of American politics was clear in the chamber. 16 years ago, a heckler during Barack Obama's speech caused outrage.
Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
Today, a member was evicted while yelling at the president. Some Democrats seem to hold genuine disgust at Mr. Trump's return, while the Republicans are showing almost total unity in support.
I have created the brand new Department of Government Efficiency.
We need a more efficient government. You want to cut waste? I'll help you do it. But change doesn't need to be chaotic or make us less safe.
God bless you and God bless America.
6 weeks in, and Donald Trump is not showing any sign he wants to make peace with political enemies at home, but seems open to mending ties with Ukraine. Carrington Clark, ABC News, Washington.
China has vowed to ramp up government spending as it eyes a looming trade war with the US. The country has announced its policies for the year, among them target rates for economic growth, unemployment and a sizable boost to Beijing's defence budget.
After years of struggling, Beijing is anticipating more economic headwinds.
Effective demand is weak and consumption, in particular, is sluggish.
At the annual gathering of China's rubber stamp parliament, the government set its GDP goal at 5%, ambitious as tariffs imposed by Washington double.
An increasingly complex and severe external environment may exert a greater impact on China in areas such as trade, science and technology.
Beijing's leaders also promised a boost to defence spending, a detail not lost on Australia, which saw unprecedented drills last month in the Tasman Sea, nor here in Taipei, where the government and most of the public do not support Beijing's plans for so-called reunification.
And the starter's gun has been fired in more than one trade war. Tariffs on America's other main trading partners, Canada and Mexico, also came into effect.
It's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal. But Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do.
All three countries hitting back with their own measures. Doubling down, Donald Trump continued to back his tariff policy.
Other countries have used tariffs against us for decades, and now it's our turn to start using them against those other countries.
Australia wasn't named, but an American steelworker in the gallery was singled out for a standing ovation. Kathleen Coldwood, ABC News.
There have been chaotic scenes in the Serbian parliament, with opposition MPs throwing smoke grenades and tear gas to protest against the government. A live TV broadcast showed pink and black smoke billowing inside parliament as politicians clashed with security guards. The action was in support of student-led anti-corruption protests, sparked by the deaths of 15 people when a railway station roof collapsed. A multi-billion-dollar Gaza reconstruction plan has been approved by Arab leaders, countering the US president's idea for it to become a Middle East Riviera. As the future of Gaza was debated in Cairo, an ambitious mercy mission to get sick children out of the war-ravaged Strip got underway. The first of 2,000 kids were evacuated to Jordan for urgent medical treatment. Middle East correspondent Matthew Doran followed them on the journey.
Difficult early morning farewells in southern Gaza for children bearing the scars of 16 months of war. Football-loving 13-year-old Ahmad, one of the first on board.
A device exploded while I was out collecting water. We were walking when a small boy was playing with it. He exploded.
He lost part of his arm and has untreated leg injuries. Ahmad's sisters are escorting him to Jordan after Israel rejected 3 applications for his mother to travel.
I am sad and afraid because I have to send my children on their own.
In another ambulance, mother Ines and baby Naveen, born with heart problems.
I hope my daughter gets treated and will be cured. I am not fully content as I am leaving my other children behind.
29 kids and 44 chaperones were driven to the Israel border by local paramedics and the World Health Organization, the first of 2,000 the Jordanian government wants to treat. It's a painfully slow 200-kilometre journey to Jordan, taking 12 hours. Although the trip seemed to invigorate Ines and baby Naveen.
The road was very good, with the presence of doctors with us. I was not at all tired and everything was perfect.
Others needed medical assistance along the way.
Their families got dizziness and vomit, and we helped them with IV fluids and medications.
The plan to treat 2,000 sick kids could be slow going. As one group completes its treatment here in Amman, they'll be sent back to Gaza and another group will be brought out. The success of this mission entirely reliant on Israel's cooperation and the ceasefire holding.
Ahmed is remaining firmly focused on the task ahead, to get back to playing football.
I hope to get an artificial prosthetic arm and fix nerves of my legs so I can walk.
A dream for many of the youngest Gazans, whose lives hang in the balance. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Amman.
To finance now, and the Aussie dollar rose in the wake of Donald Trump's speech to Congress and today's GDP numbers. But share markets fell because of America's tariffs on Mexico and Canada. Here's Alan Kohler.
Australia's per capita recession is over. After 7 consecutive quarters of falling gross domestic product divided by population, it's finally gone up 0.1% in the December quarter, which is the big story from today's national accounts. The only reasons we haven't had an actual recession is because population growth has offset falling productivity, along with public demand. That is spending by all governments, which is back to where it was in the pandemic, and that is saying something. Australian dollar scrambled back to 62.5 US cents, partly because of the solid economic data and partly because the US dollar went to the ledge and jumped off when President Trump started talking to Congress, although it didn't fall far. Deputy Reserve Bank Governor Andrew Hawser summed it up in a speech today when he talked about how trainees at the US Army War College in the late 1980s were taught to see the world as VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. And he said VUCA is back with a vengeance, showing this graph of trade policy uncertainty. And the share market is certainly having an attack of the VUCAs. The main US index, the S&P 500, is below where it was when Donald Trump won the election last year, having fallen another 1.2% last night. Shares in the UK, Europe and Canada also fell quite heavily. And in Australia, the All Ordinaries finished 0.7% lower, weighed down by retailers and banks, although Coles and Woolies both went ex-dividend. On commodity markets, iron ore slipped below $100 a tonne for the first time in a couple of months, and Bitcoin led all the cryptos higher because of Mr Trump's plan to spend taxpayers' money buying them. And that's finance.
Cyclone Alfred has played havoc with football schedules in the NRL and the AFL, with matches moved and postponed. The difference in arrangements made for the weather-affected games has left the families of some players fuming.
Two football codes and two very different approaches to dealing with the impending arrival of Cyclone Alfred in Queensland.
And because of the broadcast agreement, how things work, thankfully we were able to come up with something to move it.
The Dolphins were due to host South Sydney on Friday night, but that match has been moved to Western Sydney Stadium. It's a decision that's been slammed by Bri Nikorima, the wife of Dolphins player Cody Nikorima, who wrote on social media,
"I'm 6 months pregnant with 2 kids in an area that can flood. Disgusting. Do better, NRL."
The move's been defended by the Dolphins, who say players' partners can opt to stay together in a Brisbane hotel.
So they've got a bit more security around being with each other and obviously without their partners for that.
Meanwhile, the AFL has decided to postpone Thursday night's season opener between the Brisbane Lions and Geelong and Saturday's match between Gold Coast and Essendon, a move that's been applauded by one of the Lions' co-captains.
I wouldn't have left Jules here with our 3-year-old daughter and a 10-week, 11-week-old little boy, so that would have been pretty hard to do. I wouldn't have played.
The AFL is yet to say when the postponed matches will be played, although the game between Brisbane and Geelong could easily be moved to round 3 when both sides have a bye. It now means that the season opener will be played here at the SCG on Friday night, when the Sydney Swans take on Hawthorn.
You know, there's a lot more at stake than just a game of footy. The second thought is, it's a great opportunity for this football club and obviously to open the season.
As Brisbane and the Gold Coast prepare for the first cyclone in half a century, two football codes have a different attitude on whether the show must go on. David Mark, ABC News.
The NBL has admitted referees made an error in failing to award the Perth Wildcats 2 crucial points for a goaltend in last night's 1-point semi-final loss to Melbourne United in Game 3. Perth was denied the points when referees didn't judge a shot had hit the backboard before being touched by United's Marcus Lee. United ultimately won the match with the final possession when Chris Goulding put United in front with less than a second remaining. Melbourne United's Championship Series opponent will be decided tonight. Now with the weather, here's Adam Morgan.
Good evening, Tam. Relief has arrived in Melbourne after another scorching March day. The city reached 35.3 degrees before a southerly change arrived at 3:15. By 3:30 we were back to 25 and currently it's 21. There were bright blue skies right across Victoria with just some smoke haze through parts of Gippsland today. No rainfall with today's change, just some low cloud approaching the southwest coast this afternoon. Overnight temperatures were comfortable for sleeping, minimums generally in the low to mid-teens. But as our early autumn heat rolls on, Oudyn hit a top of 39, the Latrobe Valley 35. Only the southwest corner was spared where that change arrived earliest. And outside right now, most places south of the Divide are feeling some respite. Very hot still though further north. On satellite, that cold front that brought today's change is retreating down across Tasmania, but really all attention remains on Cyclone Alfred east of Brisbane. Alfred is now within range of weather radar and we can see the rain bands spiralling around the centre. Only a few showers so far today. The heaviest rain is still to come. Winds are picking up along the coast already, gusting to 106 kilometres per hour today at Byron Bay. They'll intensify further tomorrow. Here's the latest track around 90 minutes ago. Cyclone Alfred remains on course for Brisbane, holding at Category 2 over warm ocean waters. Landfall now expected around 4 a.m. Friday with wind gusts to around 155 kilometres per hour. The impacts are greatest on the southern side where those strongest winds are blowing onshore. There's lots of rain and potential flooding. Daily totals up to 400 millimetres possible south from Brisbane into northern New South Wales. And longer term, still the chance of some rain extending into eastern Victoria from late on Sunday. Now for us tomorrow, this high pressure system in the Bight ridges across Tasmania. Then we'll see our winds turn south to southeasterly. Around the country tomorrow though, cyclone impacts for Brisbane as Alfred approaches. Sydney, a shower or two, 27 degrees. Perth is hot and sunny. Back home, and tomorrow is mostly cloudy across the south with just some early isolated showers or drizzle that should contract to the coast by the afternoon. North of the Divide, we're looking dry and mostly sunny. It's mild to warm in the south and remaining hot in the north. Hamilton reaches 23 degrees. Chuka up to 34. Hot in the northeast as well. Under those bright blue skies, we'll get mid-20s along the Gippsland coast, though, in an onshore southeasterly. Around Melbourne, tomorrow starts mostly cloudy before sunshine returns mid-afternoon. In a moderate southerly breeze, the city is heading for 25, but a little warmer in the outer eastern suburbs. To the outlook, and sunshine on Friday. We're heading for a top of 29. Beautiful light winds and an afternoon sea breeze. Saturday, sunny and 32. 31 on Sunday. Now, maybe a shower or two, but that really depends on where the leftovers of Cyclone Alfred move inland. We're staying warm into early next week. Tops in the high 20s. Tam.
Thanks so much, Adam. That's it for this evening's bulletin. Stay with us now for 7:30 with Sarah Ferguson. Good night.